There is three of you at work and you have a big project that you worked on. All three of you contributed, but unfortunately the deadline has come and gone and you missed it. Boss comes in and he grabs one of you to have a constructive coaching conversation with on missing the project. So 1/3 of you he speaks to, not the rest of you, right? Well, what do you do? What would you do, right? Would you have him allow him to continue to talk to the one team member, or would you step up and say, hey, it was us as well? Well, most of us would step up, and in some cases, even take the blame ourselves, right? And that's known as being altruistic, when you advocate for someone else more than you would advocate for yourself. So a lot of us have it in us. It really depends on circumstance and situation. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit today about being a self mentor and advocating for yourself and the value of advocating for yourself and doing that at the same time as advocating for someone else. Is that possible? Of course it is. Of course it is. It's self-mentorship and self-apprenticeship while mentoring someone else as well, right? So you certainly can do both of those things, and really it can be and lead you to a successful, life and mental health, career, your relationships, life balance, fitness, a little bit of everything. But it's important to have a balanced approach with it. Okay? So let's talk about it. So what self-mentoring actually means? What is self-mentoring, right? A lot of us have probably mentored others or been mentees. Well, it's not pretending that you know everything. There's a podcast that I had a part of not too terribly long ago that you guys may have heard, and it had to do with approaching things as if you're a rookie. It's kind of the same mentality. It's learning how to observe yourself honestly through an honest lens, coach yourself without structure, correct yourself without shame, and encourage yourself without delusion. Doing all of those things through a very transparent lens, right? If we're talking fitness and we put the fitness skin on top of it, that's training emotionally versus training intentionally, right? You want to lean harder into the intentionally field. And the reason is because when you train emotionally, it can be relatively imbalanced. But if you know that you are mentoring yourself and you're looking through a lens of objectivity and intention and logic, then you can react in a way and make adjustments in a way that are logical. Chasing motivation versus chasing and following systems. Systems are static, they remain, they do not change. When you chase motivation, again, it can be hot or cold, and it's kind of a roll of the dice, depending on the circumstance and situation. A self-mentoring person, right, that mentors himself, they wouldn't ask, hey, what do I feel like doing today, right? Just like if you're coaching somebody else and you're advocating for somebody else and for their better good, you're not going to ask them, hey, what do you feel like doing today? If they were to, come to you and say, hey, so what are we training? Well, what do you feel like doing? Typically that's not the case, right? You're going to ask yourself, what type of person do I want to be today, right? What type of version of me would I respect to do today? What do I know I need to do today based on the systems that I've set up for myself to lead myself to success? You want to cast a vote for yourself, for who you want to be. That question alone will change how you eat, sleep, think, and your motivation that it causes also. The role of apprenticeship. So if you're an apprenticeship of yourself, right? You are self-mentoring yourself, right? What is that? And what depends on it? Well, it doesn't eliminate apprenticeship for someone else and helping out someone else. But the best way to frame it is that it's choosing to learn from coaches, mentors, systems, experiences, even mistakes, learning on a regular basis, on a daily basis to continue to grow. In fitness, you might hire a coach, follow proven programming, study recovery and nutrition, but self-mentoring decides how you apply it, when to ask questions, how to adjust without quitting. So you're kind of getting the best of both worlds. The mentally healthy approach is really to have a thought process of, I'm responsible for my own results, but I'm smart enough to learn from others at the same time, right? This mindset prevents burnout, ego, and stagnation because you're having a consistent growth and absorption on new details, new tasks, new ways to do things. Okay, now doing both at the same time, being a mentee and mentor at the same time. This is where growth accelerates. This is what leads you to the promised land, in my thought, right? So if you're only a mentee, and let's break it down, look at both sides. If you're only a mentee and you're only going to learn, what do you risk? Well, you risk dependency, right? Being overly dependent because you're waiting on somebody to tell you when to jump. Indecisiveness. If you don't know, you don't have the roadmap in front of you because it's only when somebody else tells you to do it, then what steps do you take? And waiting for permission, right? You can find yourself in the rafters just waiting until you know what direction to take the next step. Say you're only a mentor. If you're only a mentor, you risk ego, right? Which a lot of us need to check it at the door. But we have a tendency of saying, "Hey, we know how to do this," even though it might be something we need to learn more about. Blind spots. Again, you know what you know, and if you lead in with the mentality of everything that I know, I'm an expert in, then there's a chance there's some things you don't know, and you won't know that until you cross that bridge. And stagnation, right? I think things can get monotonous if you don't have some type of direction that may be coming from someone else. Okay. So if you look at both of them, though, say you combine it, you stay humble, but you stay disciplined, and then you stay curious all at the same time. If we're going to put, again, the fitness skin on it, mentoring yourself might look like adjusting training when recovery is off, right? Making that slight adjustment, pulling back when stress is high, and knowing that about yourself, looking in the mirror and holding yourself accountable when the excuses show up. That's going to happen. You know that it's in your best interest to rise up and to continue to go and stick to the process, not really reacting emotionally. Being a mentee means listening to the data, right? And the logic and the science, respecting the science, learning from others' experiences as well, kind of doing all that combined. That dual role creates a mental resilience, and you're guided, but you're not fragile either. You're kind of the best of both worlds. Okay, so kind of back to the example that we said earlier that we were talking about is advocating for yourself, but doing it to where you're not selfish. In that example, what you wouldn't do is, go to your supervisor, go to your boss and say, "What? That was all me. Everything that was done in that project was 100% me. They didn't do anything. It was all me. So we're behind because of these guys." You don't do that, and I think most of us would not react that way. But there is a balance in advocating for yourself. So what it isn't is ignoring others, right? It's not being rigid. You want to have a level of fluidity and autonomy, and forcing outcomes, right? You make adjustments where needed, and the only way to do that is have a level of humility to realize, hey, I know that I need to make adjustments, and what I'm doing needs to change. Otherwise, I'm not going on the right trajectory. It's knowing your limits, your priorities, and your values, and living by those. In fitness and mental health, it would be saying no to overtraining. It would be protecting your sleep, which I think a lot of us struggle with, myself included. Fueling properly and setting boundaries. Those are all things that you need in order to progress. A self-mentored person doesn't wait until they break. They make adjustments so that just isn't going to happen. And they look in the mirror and have a realization that those adjustments need to happen, right? That's life balance. All right, so manifestation, and just before I go on with that, one last piggyback with the last point is I'm sure some of you have seen coaches that have coaches, right? They're coaches and they have coaches, right? And you think these are some of the top line, the best of the best. And I'm not just talking fitness, there's therapists that have therapists, right? And there's a reason for that. There's a level of humility and there's processes and accountability that needs to happen. So that's why it's important. And this connects to our next point, which is manifestation. And that's manifesting reality through action, through taking action, right? And making and having a partner to do so. What manifestation isn't is wishful thinking. You can't manifest without action. It's always action, right? So thinking is the first step, obviously, but it's always action. It's repeated behavior, it's identity alignment, and consistent standards. You're always showing up. Affirmations are a very big part of it, and that changes your thought process. Your desired reality is built through small daily decisions, systems over motivation. So you map out those systems and those steps in a very objective way. And honest self feedback, being honest with yourself and understanding what steps need to be taken and realizing that sometimes I may need to back off and make adjustments. If we're talking training, right? You can't manifest muscle. I wish we could. You know, I'd probably have even more trophies back there if you can manifest muscle. You think I need bigger muscles. It doesn't work that way, right? You show up, you fuel, you recover, and repeat. You get on that treadmill and you lift those weights. You do what you know you need to do, and at the same hand, you have a very positive mindset that it's going to happen. In mental health, you don't manifest peace, right? You reduce chaos, you manage stress, you take steps and behaviors to regulate your behavior. Self mentoring gives you the clarity, and apprenticeship gives you the tools. Consistency builds the life. So you combine all three of those, and that's how you get there. So, what's the mental health benefit of this approach, right? Being a mentee and mentor at the same time. Well, it does a couple things. Balances you. It reduces your anxiety, typically, you know, because there might be a level of worry if you can't accomplish something that you know you've done before or that you feel like you're more than capable for accomplishing. But you know you have a level of humility to get there. Perfectionism, right? It helps reduce that as well because again, being a mentee, nothing is perfect and you're learning. And identity confusion, you're having constant check-ins and you're making sure that you have a level of humility in the same sense because you got to learn, right? You got to be open. You're no longer outsourcing your worth or direction. Everything's internalized, right? So you trust yourself enough to lead, but then you respect yourself enough to learn and to have continued development, right? The balance also creates emotional regulation. So you get a higher level of emotional regulation, confidence without arrogance, right? So I think sometimes we can be overly confident, but again, without arrogance because you're consistently learning. And then discipline without punishment or self punishment, because again, you have that level of humility about yourself to know that you'll have a continued push towards what you're trying to accomplish. So, the same reason structured training improves mental health. The nervous systems love predictability and progress. It loves knowing what's going to happen and what's in front of us. And the only way to do that is to define those systems. Okay, so in summary, if you want a better balance, better fitness, better mental health, then steps that would be great to take is mentor yourself with honesty, apprentice and be an apprentice of yourself with humility, advocate for your own needs, and execute consistently, right? And utilize that feedback. All the feedback that you get from your execution, utilize that as progress, right? Someone can lead themselves and still learn every single day, right? That's how you build that reality that you'll have continued progress you don't need to escape from. So I'll leave you with this. I always try to have one good factoid or one good takeaway at the very end, right? So consider yourself now and what you know now, and take the older version of yourself, right? So take 20 years off of where you are right now. Some of you might not be that old. Take 10 years off, 6 years off, 5 years off, what you are right now. And I would guarantee that you've learned something in between those years. And ask yourself, would it be to your benefit or detriment if you were to use what you know now to assist the 10-year, 20-year, 30-year younger version of yourself? Which one? Would it help you or would it hurt you?